देखिए ऐसा है, मैं जानबूझ करके लंबा नहीं करता हूँ वीडियो या ज़्यादा नहीं बनाता हूँ। टेक्स्ट पढ़ना ज़्यादा अच्छा है और सुनना तो और ज़रूरी भी है बेसिकली तो। और खाली काम काम की चीज़ें पढ़ रहा हूँ। ठीक है जी, आइए। द वीकेस्ट लिंक, a fine revelation of a known adversary, tuberculosis, and how its spread has much to do with inaccessibility of drugs, human folly, and prejudices. आइए जी, क्या कह रहे हैं? In 2020, the coronavirus ravaged the world. Another microbe took a toll of about 1.5 million lives. In that year, more people died from TB, with far fewer people being diagnosed and treated or provided with TB preventive treatment compared with 2019, and overall spending on essential TB services falling. The World Health Organization noted. भाई साहब, हाँ मतलब ये बात तो उस टाइम पे भी आई थी अखबारों में कि दे आर टेकिंग अ हिट। जो टीबी हेल्थ केयर है ना, बिकॉज ऑफ कोविड के अंदर सारे हमारे इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चरल रिसोर्सेज लग गए थे, जैसे टीबी यार नेग्लेक्ट हुआ। लाइक द नोवल कोरोना वायरस, द टीबी बैक्टीरियम इज़ अ नोन एडवर्सरी। ये पता है हमें, इसका इलाज भी पता है हमें। कोरोना वायरस का तो पता ही नहीं चल रहा है अभी तक। Humankind's battle against it goes back several centuries. That the pathogen remains intractable in large parts of the world has much to do with a lethal combination of ignorance, inequality, and policy deficits. Vidya Krishnan's Phantom Plague, How Tuberculosis Shaped History, is a searing account of humankind's failure to eliminate its oldest scourge. India, Krishnan tells us, is critical to the fight against TB. Every year 10.4 million, 1 करोड़ से ऊपर लोग, new cases of tuberculosis are reported globally. Nearly 2.8 million of the afflicted, more than anywhere else in the world, live in India. Oh my God. दो मतलब तीन एक करोड़ के आसपास. India accounted for more than 30% TB deaths in 2019. My God. The tragedy is that much of it is preventable. Yes. The victims do cut across social classes, but the poor and the marginalized bear the brunt of the pestilence, a vulnerability that has much to do with their living conditions as well as the failure of the country's medical system to provide timely diagnosis and care. In one of the most telling chapters in Phantom Plague, Krishnan takes us to building number 10 in Natwar Parekh compound in Mumbai's East Ward. Ostensibly a slum development project, the housing complex is a visual reminder of many of Mumbai's greatest challenges. The desperate shortage of real estate, a growing population crisis, and brewing public health nightmare that lurks in poorly designed urban housing. Krishnan quotes medical researchers to reveal a horrific factoid. At least one member in the matchbox shaped single room dwelling unit has drug resistant TB. My God. The unwelcoming and claustrophobic tenements, such as building number 10, are petri dishes for the tuberculosis. Maharashtra is India's TB hotspot. About a sixth of India's drug resistant TB patients live in the state, nearly half of them in Mumbai. 200 of the more than 1200 extra drug resistant TB, an extremely lethal form of the disease, patients live in the maximum city. As in several infectious diseases, the spread of TB has much to do with human folly and prejudices. A large number of doctors, Krishnan's study shows, are ignorant of the protocols to treat drug resistant TB. What makes Phantom Plague a riveting read is Krishnan's ability to join the dots between the prejudices that hobbled the efforts of the early innovators and the ignorance that still holds sway in sections of the medical establishments, between the power of big pharma, patent regimes, and policy deficits in several countries, including India, that combine to lock a large number of poor out of affordable healthcare, between ill planned housing projects and the spread of infection, between HIV and the spread of TB. Phantom Plague is simultaneously a work of medical history, anthropology, and epidemiology. We are introduced to doctors and scientists who pioneered the battle against microbes. There is a moving account of the maverick Hungarian doctor Ignaz Semmelweis. इसके ऊपर सीधा सवाल आ गया था भाइयों यूपीएससी के अंदर. whose insistence that doctors helping women deliver babies must wash their hands with lime before conducting their procedure earned him the displeasure of his colleagues, leading to his ostracization and death in an asylum. Oh my god. हाथ धोने पे इन्होंने वो दिया था। और ये यूपीएससी के सीएससी के पेपर में नहीं, लेकिन आपके मेरे ख्याल में एनडीए के या फिर किसी न किसी एक पेपर के अंदर आया था ये सवाल सीधा का सीधा उठ के। पता कैसे लगा कि टीबी बड़ा मुद्दा है, मलेरिया बड़ा मुद्दा है, उसके रिलेटेड अखबार में जो चीज़ें आई हैं या फिर जो सिग्निफिकेंट इवेंट्स हुए हैं हिस्ट्री के अंदर वो पता होनी चाहिए। By washing hands before assisting women deliver babies, doctors would obviate chances of infection, leading to a drastic fall in the death of women from childbed infection. Other well-known trailblazers such as Joseph Lister, Robert Koch, and Louis Pasteur also find a place in Krishna's account. In a little more than 250 pages, Phantom Plague lays out the changing character of the war against the disease. The medical advances in the last 150 years have made TB a curable disease, but the knowledge boom seems to elude not just patients but also policymakers and doctors. Most patients in building number 10, for instance, were prescribed common antibiotics as the first line of treatment, which made their condition even worse. Oh. In chapters on two patients, Pia and Shreya, Krishnan brings alive the trauma of those suffering the lethal form of the disease. एक यार ये दवाइयों को लेकर के तो हमारे देश में सच में बड़ा मेडिकल जो प्रिस्क्रिप्शन है बहुत ही लूजली हम लोग इसको मतलब रिगार्ड करते हैं यार। एक कल्चर जो मैंने अपने घरों में देखा है, बिलोंग फ्रॉम अ मिडिल क्लास फैमिली, तो मैंने यही कि भाई दर्द हो रहा है तो वो गोली खा लो, ये हो रहा है तो वो गोली खा लो, मतलब गोलियाँ तो हम ऐसे खाते हैं पॉपिंस की तरह। और डॉक्टर्स के ऊपर भी ऐसी कोई ख़ास नकेल कसी नहीं है। मेरे ख्याल में आखिरी बार प्राइवेट प्रैक्टिस को लेकर के एक कोई लैंडमार्क डिसीजन आया था, उसके बाद से देर इज़ नथिंग एक्चुअली कंट्रोलिंग डॉक्टर्स ऑफ द काइंड ऑफ प्रिस्क्रिप्शंस दे डू, अनफेयर practices they follow, with MRs and all, supporting big pharma, and there has to be something thought in this direction. I read somewhere 65% of out-of-pocket kharcha of an aam aadmi average goes on medical. 65%. The contrasting fortunes of the two, Shreya succumbed to the disease, also frame the lack of choices that make the battle of the war against the disease a near impossible one. The book shows how the patent system prevents access to life-saving drugs, making patients from poor households depend on the generosity of pharma majors. That's why Krishnan's book is an important addition to the recent debate on patents on life-saving therapies and preventives occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic. At the same time, Phantom Plague is a wake-up call to governments, including India, to apply correctives to policies. A rationing system for extra drug-resistant TB medicines, for instance, that was partially corrected after a Delhi High Court directive that keep healthcare out of the reach of large sections of people. Recent initiatives like Ayushman Bharat notwithstanding. As Krishnan points out, much like those who suffered from HIV/AIDS in the early years of the disease, Indian TB patients must grapple with a horrible reality. Available drugs do not work for them, and newer medication is out of reach. Her work is a must read for students of medical policy, epidemiologists, medical journalists, and also those who yearn for a more humane society. A similar, more towards the ethical side type of article will go. For worse, never better, an exceptional study reviews the multiple markers of oppression and victimhood that women face in rural North India. Reading Reena Kukreja's book, one is reminded of reading Karl Marx in a different setting. The book forms the link between the vast body of work on the workings of caste, kinship, and marriage networks in India and the specific context of liberalization and its impact on rural North India. Kukreja writes, in India, the accumulative process got a fillip from the early 1990s when it wholeheartedly embraced the नियोलिबरल प्रोजेक्ट थ्रू द एडॉप्शन ऑफ स्ट्रक्चरल एडजस्टमेंट प्रोग्राम्स। क्या कहा इन्होंने? नियोलिबरल प्रोजेक्ट यानी कि एक ये कंसेंसस सा बना था उस टाइम पे ड्यूरिंग 1990 जब हमने भी एलपीजी किया था। यू नो हाउ शुड द रिसोर्सेज ऑफ अ स्टेट बी मैनेज्ड, गवर्नमेंट कैसे होनी चाहिए। उसके छोटे छोटे पिलर्स थे कि यू नो डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन ऑफ पावर, है ना, और लोगों का पार्टिसिपेशन और इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ की तरफ वो करना, समझ रहे हैं? मतलब ओपन मार्केट्स, फ्री ट्रेड्स, ठीक है, प्रमोशन ऑफ कंपटीशन। पढ़िएगा, ये नियो लिबरलिज्म के बारे में पढ़िएगा। This resulted in the alienation of producers from means of production and the creation of a reserve army of dispossessed and landless people who could provide cheap, flexible and disposable labor for the accumulative process। अभी जो नियो लिबरलिज्म आया था ना, इसको डेमोक्रेटिक सिस्टम या फिर कैपिटलिज्म के साथ में भी जोड़ा जाता है, जिसके मेन टेनेट्स ऐसे रहे हैं कि भाई it actually promotes a system where very few individuals who actually own the means of production, which is ऐसी कोई भी चीज़ जिससे पैसा बनता है या आता है, जैसे कि लैंड, पैसा, एसेट्स, वो एक तरफ हो जाते हैं और दूसरी तरफ ऐसे लोग होते हैं उनके पास ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता, दे हैव नो रिलेशन टू मीन्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन, और सिर्फ उनके पास अपने बेचने के लिए अपना लेबर होता है। वो डिस्पोजेस्ड होते हैं, वो लैंडलेस होते हैं। इस तरह की दो क्लासेस में सोसाइटी बट जाती है एज पर कार्ल मार्क्स। तो ये जो नियो लिबरलिज्म आया, according to the writer of this passage, it actually promoted this kind of situation. The distinctiveness of this phase, she further writes, also lies in the destruction of social relations through commoditization. It commoditizes everything, not even sparing daily life. तो अभी अपने आर्ग्यूमेंट को प्रूव कर रहे हैं कि भाई द डिस्टिंक्टिवनेस ऑफ दिस फेज, कि भाई ये न्यू लिबरल जो हरकत हुई, इसकी वजह से ये गैप बढ़ा या ये गैप और ज़्यादा उभर के सामने आया। इस चीज़ का प्रूफ है कमोडिटाइजेशन, सोशल रिलेशंस का टूटना, और कमोडिटाइजेशन, सोशल रिलेशंस का टूटना। लोग बाग गाँव में आराम से रहा करते थे, खेती वेती किया करते थे, अच्छी कम्युनिटीज़ में रहा करते थे। अब एकदम से लोग बाग उठ करके आ गए हैं आपके फैक्ट्रीज़ के अंदर काम करने के लिए। फैमिली लाइफ तो गई भाड़ में। बाप अपने बच्चे को खाली हॉरिजॉन्टली बढ़ते देखता है, वर्टिकली देख नहीं पाता है। क्राइम बहुत है क्योंकि भुखमरी है, बहुत ज़्यादा डेस्परेटनेस है, पैसे की कमी है, पॉवर्टी है, बीमारियां हैं। आप जहाँ काम करने जाते हैं वहाँ पर आपके सो कॉल्ड दोस्त नहीं होते हैं, खाली कलीग होते हैं। यू हैव नो सोशल लाइफ एज सच, ठीक है। यू आर जस्ट, सो दिस डिस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ सोशल रिलेशंस, न्यूक्लियराइजेशन ऑफ फैमिली, फैमिलीज न्यूक्लियर हो गई हैं, ठीक है। कमोडिटाइजेशन, कमोडिटाइजेस एवरीथिंग, नॉट इवन स्पेयरिंग डेली लाइफ। देखते हैं कमोडिटाइजेशन मतलब वो बात हो गई कि भाई देखिए ना, एक चीज़ होती है कि पानी बॉटल्ड वाटर कब बना। सोचिए, इस पे थोड़ा ध्यान दीजिए पहले से आज तक। मतलब पानी जैसी चीज़ को आपने कमोडिटाइज कर दिया सर, कमोडिटी बन गई, वो पैसे में आती है, थोड़े दिन में हवा भी हो जाएगी। ये कैपिटलिज्म का बहुत बड़ा हाथ है इसमें। The long shadows of the alienation of producers from their products and of commodity fetishism are clearly discernible. Kukreja studies a form of non-customary marriages among both Hindus and Muslims in rural North India, especially in parts of Haryana, and places the phenomena of rising marriage migration against the backdrop of the liberalization of the 1990s. ठीक है, ये कह रही हैं कि ये जो मैरिज बेस्ड माइग्रेशन है ज़्यादा 1990 के बाद के लिबरलाइजेशन के उससे ही हुआ है। नॉन कस्टमरी मैरिज मतलब देखते हैं। शी बिगिंस बाय आस्किंग स्पेसिफिक क्वेश्चंस, the most important being whether these marriages could be considered as trafficking or whether they could be termed as carefully considered migration strategies. However, there are no clear answers here. What the reader rather notes is that Kukreja considers the lens of victimhood restrictive to a broader understanding of the process of migration. She therefore looks at how this migration strategy worked for these women in their everyday lives. देखें, ये शादी की वजह से होने वाले माइग्रेशन की बात कर रहे हैं. This becomes all the more significant when one considers the neoliberal movement as one of dispossession which works through the expansion of capital. Kukreja challenges the notion of overarching changes that the expansion of capital was supposed to bring about and looks at how the pre-existing discriminations not only remain but are also reinforced with the movement of capital. She enters the intimate domain of marriage making to come to a broader understanding of intersectional identities and uses gendered matrimonial disposition as a framework of discussion. The methodology that Kukreja employs is significant. Recognizing multiple markers in the notion of oppression and victimhood that women face, she uses a variety of tools in stitching together her narrative. She uses surveys, one on one interactions, interviews involving focus groups, and so on. It goes without saying that marginalized communities fall prey to further marginalization through the unequal distribution of resources, which become legitimized through state practices and the proliferation of markets. This is an article basically for sociology students, not much for the other guys. वो मोटी मोटी बात आप समझ जाएं वो भी बड़ी बात है. इस पर ज़्यादा समय लगा करके ऐसा कोई बड़ा फ़ायदा हो नहीं रहा. इसके बजाय हम एक ये देखते हैं, काफ़ी इंपॉर्टेंट दिख रहा था. 5 green verdicts cost government 8,000 crore revenue. Let us see. The government lost revenue worth rupees 8,000 crore from mid 2018 to 21, and at least 75,000 people were adversely impacted, with around 16,000 workers losing their jobs due to 5 major environment-related judgments passed by the Supreme Court and NGT, a report commissioned by the Niti Aayog has estimated. The verdicts assessed in the report include 3 judgments by the Apex Court stopping iron ore mining in Goa, shutting down Sterlite Copper's Tuticorin plant in Tamil Nadu, and halting consultation of Mopa Airport in Goa, and 2 from the NGT, the sand mining ban case, and halt on construction activities in Delhi NCR. ये हैं बड़े मुद्दे जहाँ पर एनवायरनमेंट की वो रख के साख रख के एनजीटी ने और सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने ऐसा किया है कि भाई एनवायरनमेंट फ्रेंडली डिसीजंस दिए. According to a person aware of the deliberations about the but at what cost, जैसा कि आपने हेडलाइन में देखा, ठीक है, एनवायरनमेंट तो बच रहा है लेकिन इतने लोग बेरोजगार हो गए हैं और इतना खर्चा देखो. According to a person aware of the deliberations about the report, these 5 cases were chosen due to their prominence when the report was being commissioned. According to the report titled Economic Impact of Select Decisions of the Supreme Court and National Green Tribunal of India, in the aftermath of the 5 verdicts, the industry lost close to rupees 15,000 crore in revenues, and workers lost around rupees 500 crore of income. The estimated revenue loss of rupees 8,000 crore to the government could have resulted in an economic impact of more than rupees 20,000 crore if invested as capital expenditure, it said. हाँ तो लेकिन एक काम करो, फिर एनवायरनमेंट की आग लगा दो. The report was first commissioned in 2019 and has been finalized with financial support from the Niti Aayog. It was prepared by Jaipur-based policy research and advocacy group CUTS International, which submitted the report to the government think tank this June. In an order passed in 2018, the Supreme Court had cancelled Vedanta Limited's lease to mine iron ore, which the then Goa government had renewed in 2014. The order also directed mining companies to stop all mining operations until they obtained new environmental clearances and leases. कोई पूछ ले कि गोवा के अंदर भी आयरन मिलता है कि तो बता देना भाई है. Due to this ban, the report said state public debt increased at a compound annual growth rate of 10.6%, 0.6% from 2007 to 21. While the market loans taken by the state increased at a CAGR of 1993. Consequently, due to mining suspension. पैसा ले तो रखा है लोन में, कहीं लगाया नहीं प्रोडक्टिव एक्टिविटी में, तो क्या ही होगा। ओहो। As a result of the ban on mining in the coastal state, the total revenue earned by the Goa government between financial years 15-16 and 17-18 was rupees this much, 1128 crore, which declined by 79% to 231 crore between 18 and 21, a difference of rupees 897 crore, the report said. As a consequence of the mining ban in Goa, the central and state revenues cumulatively suffered an estimate deficit of 668 crore in taxes paid by the mining companies, whereas the state revenues exclusively suffered an estimated deficit of 1800 crore. While quashing 88 mine leases, the Supreme Court could have directed the government of Goa to restart mining operations with a stipulated time under the court's supervision and facilitated by a committee of subject experts including economists, environmentalists, etc. The report recommended. बोले ऐसा किया जा सकता था, उसको सही तरीके से जो इलीगल हो रहा था उसको लीगल करके कराया जा सकता था. It added, such an approach could have been informed by an impact analysis of the mining suspension, initiated and supervised by the SC itself. The analysis could have also explored the best possible environmental protection measures to keep the damage to the minimum. In 2019, the Apex Court suspended an economic clearance obtained by the Goa government towards the development of a second international airport in Mopa. Due to discrete judicial restraints on the construction of the airport, remobilization of resources, and COVID 19 pandemic delays, the report said the cost of the first phase of the airport increased from 1900 crore to rupees 2615 crore, 38% cost overrun. In April, an expert committee laid out additional environmental safeguards and conditions for the construction of the airport, which was accepted by the Apex Court on January 16, 2020, withdrawing the suspension from EC. The airport is slated to be operationalized in August this year. खर्चा तो बढ़ ही गया. The Sterlite copper plant in Tuticorin, Tamil Nadu, which was shut down in 2018 by the state's Pollution Control Board, SPCB, with the Apex Court later refusing to grant relief to Sterlite, impacted the incomes of the people who lost their jobs, reducing their monthly incomes by at least 50% while rendering many jobless. And at the time of COVID, actually, this was, I remember, the report said. The judiciary needs to be equipped well to balance economic and ecological interests of the country, the report recommended. For instance, in response to the ban on construction in Delhi NCR, which was put in place by the Commission for Air Quality Management in November 2021 and lifted a month later, the report suggested that the ineffectiveness of procedures adopted by the judiciary and the executive in curbing pollution highlights the existence of loopholes in the set procedures and system owing to various reasons such as capacity and expertise constraints, paucity of resources, etc. It also said that the courts should undertake economic impact analysis facilitated by a group of experts including economists, environmentalists, sociologists, among others, to address and adjudicate public interest cases involving economic sensitive matters. कुछ भी समझाने का है नहीं, बात आपको समझ आ गई है. एक काम करिए, जा करके पब्लिक इंटरेस्ट क्या होता है इसके ऊपर ध्यान से थोड़ा सा समय व्यतीत करें. एक आखिरी छोटा सा इंटरेस्टिंग है. स्मोक इन केबिन फोर्सेस स्पाइस जेट फ्लाइट टर्न बैक, 5th इंसिडेंट इन 2 months. क्या कर रहे हैं यार, ये क्या खेल रहे हैं? In what is at least the 5th air safety incident involving a SpiceJet aircraft in the last 2 months. A Jabalpur-bound flight operated by the low-cost carrier on a Bombardier Q400-8 plane made an emergency landing in Delhi Saturday morning after smoke was noticed in the aircraft cabin. Mayday call. The aircraft took off from Delhi early Saturday, and while climbing past 5,000 feet, the crew noticed smoke in the cabin along with the lavatory smoke alarm sound going off. A top official at the DGCA said cabin crew informed cockpit crew of mild smoke in the cabin, but on visual check, no sign of smoke or damage was observed in lavatory, the official said. Later, when passing 14,000 feet, increased smoke was seen in the cabin, and the same was conveyed to the pilots, who leveled the aircraft at 15,000 feet and initiated a turn back to Delhi, the official said, adding that a Mayday call was declared to the air traffic control. The aircraft landed safely in Delhi few minutes after 7 a.m. and all passengers were evacuated on the taxiway. In a statement, a SpiceJet spokesperson said on July 2, 2022, SpiceJet Q400 aircraft was operating SG-296 to Delhi Jabalpur. While passing 5,000 feet, the crew noticed smoke in the cabin. The pilots decided to return back to Delhi. Aircraft landed safely at Delhi and passengers were safely disembarked. Safety incidents. This is at least the fifth air safety incident faced by the airline in the last 2 months. अब देखो ना यार, ये कौन सिगरेट पी रहा है अंदर जा कर के, मतलब ये हमारी आदत ही है यार, हम ऐसे अजीब से हैं ना, मतलब हम नहीं जानते कि लॉज और रूल्स खाली हमारी सेफ्टी के लिए हैं. June 19, two SpiceJet incidents were reported. One involving bird hit on a Boeing 737 operated Patna-Delhi flight, in which the pilots landed back safely at Patna after the engine shut down, and the other also involving Bombardier Q400-8 plane from Delhi to Jabalpur that had to make an emergency landing in Delhi after cabin pressure did not build up in line with the altitude gain of the plane. Prior to this, on May 4, a SpiceJet-operated Boeing 737 MAX plane from Chennai to Durgapur made an air turn back after one of its engines had to be shut down mid-air as a result of an oil filter warning. क्या खिलवाड़ कर रहे हो यार? Just days before this, a SpiceJet Boeing 737 aircraft from Mumbai to Durgapur flew into severe turbulence shortly before landing, which led to several passengers being severely injured. This is in addition to the GGCA intervening with SpiceJet's simulator training program for the Boeing 737 MAX plane, where it was found that the airline continued to train its pilots on a simulator with known equipment faults. Following the Mumbai-Durgapur incident, where the damaged aircraft that had witnessed severe turbulence was allowed to take off from Durgapur, the DGCA had ordered a check of all SpiceJet planes. उठो जागो और कुछ करो, वरना हवाई जहाज गिर जाएगा.